Hey everyone, I'm waiting for Jay to send a request to be in a video. So I'll be talking with her tonight. Oh, she's texting me, 1 second. Um, Jay is a person from, a person, of course she is, one of our esteemed tattoo artists in London. She is a friend, as all of the artists, and a very interesting person who will tell you all kinds of things. Here she is. Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I like that backdrop you found. Is that your wallpaper?
It's in my house.
That's cool. Is your house entirely um
Sorry?
is your house entirely set up like that with a nice floral background?
No, there's like maybe 3 rooms actually that have like really, really nice floral wallpaper. My landlord has impeccable taste for this, I have to say. He's also a friend. So yeah, but this one is my favorite.
Choice. How are you?
I'm good. I'm surprisingly good.
Okay. Well, that's what okay. There was some
I,
delay, but oh, it wasn't the headphones. I think it is. Oh, it's fine. Whatever. So yeah,
yeah.
how's quarantine and isolation confinement been? Are you alone in your house?
Yeah, just me
Okay.
and my cat. But yeah, alone.
Which is how you like it,
And
or did you wish you had other people around?
um I'm fine by myself. I wouldn't have minded having my partner with me, for
Of
example,
course.
but it's like when you live in 2 different countries and you know you're going to be
Hey, Bob.
stuck at home for a while, you kind of want to have your own space and all of your things because you never know what could happen in terms of administration or anything. So, and I'm kind of used to being by myself, so is he, but I'm very much used to just being a loner. So now it's been treating me, it's not that different from my daily life apart that I don't get to go to work and make a living normally. But yeah, rest of the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Well, that's
So
nice to hear. I think I think it's quite interesting how it sort of impacted people in very different ways.
yeah,
And I don't know. I mean, I live almost the opposite situation where my house is pretty crowded, but I've been wondering like how would it be if in another life or previous life if it was just me, and I don't know. I think I'd probably be fine with it as well. Um,
yeah, it's I've had so many different feedback from people around me recently, like even closed ones. Some of them just they can't wait to just be out of lockdown, and for me, it's not that I can't wait, but it's more like, yeah, I'm one of the lucky that is not psychologically too impacted by this. It's like
yeah.
financially, of course, like everybody who's self-employed right now, but otherwise, yeah, no, it's yeah, I'm counting my blessings right now because yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm very glad to hear. I'm just going to do to mention something to the people watching. There is a little box at the bottom of the screen next to the comment field with a little question mark. That's where you can ask questions for that to the Q&A part. It's better that than ask questions in the comments because we're not necessarily going to be reviewing all the comments. So if there's any questions, the best thing is to put everything there. And either way, if depending if the conversation starts getting, like depending how inspired and we get. If it gets too long and people have to switch off or whatever, then we'll be reposting the video anyway. So in case, you can always catch up later on YouTube or on my IGTV, and if Jay wants to repost as well, then obviously. So yeah, just for people watching. But yeah, so well, that's nice to hear. As I was saying, and yeah, I mean, as we said as well, I don't have necessarily a very sort of sort of set format for the conversation. I think the point is to kind of find, like to go to places where, to sort of touch upon what makes us, you like things that are more personal, like things that make us not just like a tattoo artist or this or that, but like, how do we get there, and what is, things that are much more personal, in relation to what we do, of course. Anyway, so it's fairly free. But I think it's always good to sort of get started with how did you get here? How did you get to this point today, this time and place, and being a tattoo artist, being an artist, being yourself in England into 2020?
Wow, yeah. Okay. So, I've been living in England for like 5 years now, and before that, I was living in north of France, where I did my apprenticeship for a year or something.
Where
So,
was that?
Lille.
Lille. And what was the studio?
The studio was called Mike's Tattoo,
Mm-hmm.
used to, and now it's called Shell Baby,
Okay.
and it's owned by someone called Mike. And that's where I did my apprenticeship, along with someone who was tattooing there at the time was Nada, who now works in Bordeaux, someone who I
Okay.
haven't heard from in years, but I hold really close to my heart. So yeah, so I've worked in that shop for a year, and then I've worked in Lille for probably, well, I started my apprenticeship in late 2009,
Mm-hmm.
and then I moved to London in 2015. So it gives you like the amount of time I spent in France tattooing. It was all in Lille. I'm not from there originally, but that's where I moved from to do my apprenticeship. Before that, I did art studies in Lyon at Émile Cole, and then a bit less than a year, at Saint-Luc in Brussels.
Oh, cool.
And there I studied comics and illustration mainly. I dabbled a tiny bit. Like I studied a little bit of animation when I was in Lyon, but that's like really like a tiny portion of my training. And yeah, and before that, I lived in the south of France. But yeah, basically.
Is that where you're from?
South of France?
Yeah.
I'm from the southwest, the west, really, because I'm going to get insults in the comments otherwise if I say southwest. But I'm from Angoulême. I was born in Angoulême originally. Yeah. And I would say like the main, like my family is from Bordeaux.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I spent probably 15 years in this part of the country. Then I moved to the south, like to a town where I lived for 5 years with my mom, who is now, like, it's called Béziers, who is very sadly known for questionable
skateboarding.
And yeah, and after that I was just traveling and moving from town to town, and it got me to moving to London in 2015.
Okay, well that's interesting in many ways, at least for the sort of sake of the conversation, because, well, I actually do happen to know Béziers because of a famous skateboard contest that used to happen there in the 90s, probably. So it's probably not, it doesn't exist anymore, and actually never been, but all my friends used to go. I was a bit too young to go, but my older friends were always sort of driving to Béziers for the contest.
That's
So yeah,
interesting. Never heard of it.
there you go.
I've
And
heard there
yeah,
was like
sorry.
there was an extreme sport festival or competition, the FIS in
Hmm.
Montpellier
Hmm.
afterwards. So I wonder if that isn't what it became. I don't know. I've absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. I could be wrong, but yeah, maybe it just migrated.
Maybe, yeah. And then there's another thing that I find quite interesting where I'll sort of try and tie in with some certain aspects that I personally find quite interesting, also because they are things that I've always been interested in, or that I sort of came from in some ways. But you said you're from Angoulême originally. Are you from
Hmm.
Angoulême? So, or you're, yeah. And Angoulême, for
Was
those who,
born there.
right, and for those who don't know, is famous for its comic book,
Mm,
comic
mm,
festival.
mm, mm.
And and that is, does that have to do, does that have anything to do with your style or your own back sort of?
It's I would say it's a complete coincidence because I was born there, but my family isn't originally from there. Just
Okay.
my parents moved to Angoulême because my dad had a good job opportunity. So I think, if I remember correctly, and that's where I was born, and my sister too, and that's where we lived for 15 years. But no, it's not because of this. I would say it's definitely fueled a lot of
Right.
my passion for comics because so yeah, Angoulême is very famous for this international comic festival. So if you're into comics and if you know comics festival, you've probably heard of it. It's a tiny, like Angoulême is a really tiny town, but it's
Hmm.
like submerged with people every year. And from people from like all countries, it's incredible. It was incredible when I was a kid. So it definitely fueled a lot of my love for comics because I remember my mother taking me and my sister to the festival, seeing the artist. I
Hmm.
remember we still have comic books that were like that had drawings from like authors who didn't have anyone at that time, and it was really sweet. It was a really good
Nice.
memory. But it's I would say that um, it didn't just come from this because my dad paints and draws, and there was lots of
Just
other people in the family doing it too. So it's kind of a multitude of things.
right. Did you work professionally before you started tattooing or apprenticing, or did you just go straight for tattooing?
I went straight for tattoos. The thing is, when I was doing my studies, I reached a point where I couldn't see I couldn't project myself drawing comics in the end. This is what
Hmm.
I've always wanted to do. Like comics was really my passion and what I loved. But
Hmm.
when I reached 23 and I was looking at the industry around me, I felt like there was no way I was going to thrive and be happy in that
Hmm.
profession. It's like um, I wanted to live a little bit, to live life a little bit, and comics was not going to give me this. Like,
Right.
so when I was 23, I was already tattooed, and I was thinking, what could I do with my life that could allow me to just still do what I want to do, which is drawing and painting and whatever, and traveling,
Interesting.
but and that could help me get back to comics later in time, which I did in
Right.
2015, actually, just before I moved to London. And that's when I thought, like, it just came like it was, yeah, it was how do you say, not logical. It was une évidence.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it just it felt like that's what
Mhm.
I was supposed to do. So that's when
Okay.
I looked for an apprenticeship.
So how did even the idea of tattooing become a thing for you? Did you get tattooed before? Did you have tattooed people around, or how did that come across?
That's really interesting when I think about it because I've been around tattoo artists since I was probably 14, 15. 15, probably
Right.
15, because in Béziers, so where I lived,
Mm-hmm.
very close to my house, a tattoo shop opened that was
Mm-hmm.
owned by someone who's called Bertrand, who owns now Bouzy de Luxe in Toulouse.
Okay.
And we just became friends. I came into his shop and showed him my drawings, and we just became friends. But at that time, I wasn't thinking about just becoming a tattoo artist. He was all alone in his shop. It was just like this one guy who was just like really crazy looking and really fun, and I just felt really comfortable around him. So that's how I started hanging out with him. And yeah, that's it. And then I got tattooed later for the first time when I was 19 by someone else, because he had moved out by that time, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I was around him, and other friends of mine were older at that time and were starting to get tattooed. And my ex-boyfriend at that time wanted a tattoo, and he had asked me to design it for him, which we never ended up doing. But tattooing was there. It was part of my life, but it's just like when I got a tattoo, it was just like, okay, I got a tattoo. I knew it was the first one of a long list. That's just what I knew.
Yeah.
But it felt normal from the beginning, really, but not like it was not consuming like this is something I need to do.
Right.
It's just part of the scenery.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's funny because I just had a flashback of before I did tattoos myself. I also did, like, from a relatively young age, designed tattoos for friends, or designed things that eventually got tattooed, and it was sort of around me for quite a while. I did that. That's really funny, actually. It's a story that I've almost never told. I mean, it's not really a story, but like it's interesting. The first tattoo I actually designed, like, properly, uh, was for a friend of mine at the time, a graffiti writer. We used to paint together, and we were in San Francisco in 2000, actually, for the 1999 New Year's Eve, like year 2000 New Year's Eve. And I designed a tattoo for him, and he actually got tattooed. We just looked for a shop in San Francisco. I knew nothing. I mean, I knew I loved tattoos, but I did not do tattoos or whatever. And it's 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that I realized that actually, because I knew I had some photos of him getting tattooed somewhere, they completely disappeared. They was like stuck in boxes during moves and whatnot. And I found the photo, and he was actually getting tattooed. He got tattooed by Juan Puente from Black Heart, who,
Cool.
so obviously, legendary. And the tattoo he has, the design is what it is, but it's actually extremely well done, as you would expect, of course. And it's funny because it's like, I was always quite impressed by the quality of the execution. I didn't know much, but even like a couple of years later, 3 years later, it was a lettering, and it was kind of graffiti, cross, scripts kind of style, and it was just black and white, and uh, and it was extremely well executed, and I have to say, like, and yeah, and when I saw that it was actually Juan Puente, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny. I sent I need to find the photo somewhere. So that is the thing. But it's interesting because I think what you describe as the way you got there is it's actually quite unusual. I feel like for the majority of people, but tell me if you haven't get another impression. But I feel that for the majority of people, getting into tattooing is kind of a disruption in a way or another. It's kind of a big deal. Like, I choose to do that. It's rarely a kind of seamless thing. But uh, but also I find it intriguing because I think there's maybe a bit of a generational thing there, where, like, maybe now the with time, the, like, younger people in the industry are more likely to have a story like that, like Gina the other day, for example, who like did that with her dad. You know, I thought that was an amazing story. How old are you, if I may? Unless you want to keep it secret for the internet. Sorry, you completely froze for a little while. So I
Sorry,
was
yeah, me too.
just asking if you don't mind me asking, how old are you now?
34.
34. Um, yeah, I mean, you're not, yeah, I mean, interesting. Um, so very interesting. How was the apprenticeship?
It was it was short. It was very short. It was because it only lasted a year.
Right.
And I would say that there were some good, really good times,
Hmm.
and it it was a bit rocky.
Right.
I would say just that I don't necessarily do well in it's difficult to put. It's I don't yeah, no, it didn't. It went well and didn't go well at the same time. It's terrible because you don't want to say anything mean or anything, but it's yeah. Yeah, I would say it was
Okay,
short.
so
It ended too soon.
what did you, yeah, I mean, you know, with I totally, I think it's probably part of the whole, I mean,
Mm.
I don't know. I think more it more often than not, people have, you know, when you ask them about their apprenticeship, they have this kind of like reaction, um, including myself, I guess. But I think, you know, if people ask me, I'll just, you know, tell like the amount, you know, the amount of amazing stuff I did come across, I did learn,
Mm.
the amazing experience I did have, and leave the rest aside, I guess.
Yeah,
Can you point out a few things that you felt were kind of important during the apprenticeship?
it was important because it was still what got me into tattooing.
Right.
For starters,
Hmm.
um, it's just that I have a lot of trouble sugarcoating anything in my life, so that's why it's difficult for me to be like, oh, it was not that bad. It was this or it was that. So it's just yeah, it got me into tattooing, and I still learned a lot of things from that environment that I would have probably never learned
Hmm.
if I was on my own. Um, I met a lot of great people during that time. It got me a lot of contacts. It's just yeah, it was still, yeah, I had some really good times during this time. It's during my apprenticeship, and some really good times. It was just really short because yeah, a year was definitely not enough, and I got propelled into doing my own thing just all alone. And it was kind of baptism of fire, you might
Yeah, yeah.
say. Yeah, it's well, I had to do it. I had to learn how to pack color on my own, and I had to, build my portfolio on my own and just go to shops and just be like, hey, hi, when it was like, it was little in 2010, 11.
Hmm.
So cities like this were not like bursting with shops like now.
Right.
And it was only street shops. You didn't have private shops or anything. So it was just like you had to go from shops to shops and just hope that there's some space left.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky. I was very lonely during the first year of my apprenticeship, but
Hmm.
very lucky of the opportunities that I got.
And so, and how did so maybe a couple of you know, a couple of questions, more like just, you know, of your path as an like professional path, and before we get more into the, you know, questions of inspiration and stuff like that. But um, so how did the transition work? I guess one thing that I personally like to ask, because I find that is at least one of the things that I find the most interesting in relation to tattooing in general and tattoo culture and tattoo industry. is the sort of differences that you find between different countries, obviously, or regions, because tattooing is both extremely globalized and has, didn't wait for the internet to be globalized. It's been globalized because of sailors that were traveling and carrying, designs around, and it's, from very early on related to traveling and whatnot. But then, so it's that, and then at the same time, it's so quintessentially related to, you know, the, the spirit of a certain place, of a certain, and if there's only so far that just being on the internet and just being international, you need to always like balance those two things. And I work quite differently. I definitely know that places that I know well, but like different places, if I'm in the UK, if I'm in Switzerland or somewhere else in Europe, or if I'm in the US, East Coast, West Coast, I know that I will work slightly differently, that I will be asked slightly different things, and it's still me doing it. But anyway, so my question, I guess, is, how did it work for you getting into being a professional tattooist, being a young tattooist, being a young woman tattooist in France, and how did the transition to the UK work out?
That's a very interesting question, because international tattooing being international is something I really hold dear. It's as a woman, there was some tough times and but I would say in general, my generation of female tattoo artists, depending on where we work and who we work with at the moment, we have it slightly better than the generation that came before us. So I would say my personal point of view is that I've encountered plenty of things that made me cringe, like over cringe. But personally, it was pretty smooth sail, I would say, because also, since I'm not extremely social, I could protect myself by just minding my own business and doing my thing and not showing too much of myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's also why there's nothing about me really as a person on my professional page. I know some people would love to know more about this and interact more with this part of people, but for me, that's something that I like to keep very private, because as a woman in the industry, this is something that I also like to protect. It's like, some people can be biased when you talk to you when you're a woman. I noticed that some people come to me in my DMs and talk to me like I'm a man. Like, they really call me, use he pronouns, and I don't mind at all. I accept all pronouns. I really have no preference. But it's very interesting how differently people talk to you once they know that you're a man or a woman. And I really like having these lines blurred, really.
Mm-hmm.
I find it really interesting, especially because, like, yeah, it's gonna switch in people's brain how they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
talk to you. But in the industry at large, I would say I was really lucky to have worked with the people I've worked with, and I think I've made a good job at finding good people to work with, just surrounding myself with people I deem just decent. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's long work. It's not something you achieve overnight. It's, yeah, 10 years of just working in different shops and just finally knowing what you want and what you don't want.
So
And
do you feel that you also kind of, to carry on with the sailing metaphor, that you had to sort of stir or like navigate um, uh, towards also an environment that, do you feel that you sort of tailored or navigated towards certain environments that you felt more compatible with?
oh yeah, absolutely, completely.
Amazing.
And that's the beauty of tattooing in 2020, I feel. It's just the diversity of shops
Yes.
and people available to work with. For someone like me, for example, who is quite picky with the people I choose to work with and the environment I choose to work in, it's amazing for this. It's just like my last example I can date is, for example, Black Iris in
Hmm.
New York, Greenpoint,
Right.
where I worked. I didn't know them. I had never met them, never
Interesting.
talked to them, but just saw I followed the shop for years, and I just loved the vibe, just loved what they showed. So I just sent them a message and asked if I could work there. And now they are some of my favorite people, and it's one of my favorite experiences I've ever lived. So it's yeah, I think it's very, you have to be really careful about who you choose to work with, especially as a woman in the industry or as a non-binary person or just as a person in general. If you have taste, just be careful of who you choose to work with, because it's, for me, it's yeah, I I'm extremely sensitive to this. Like a bad environment could just ruin everything. I'm not good at, like having blinds and just like doing my things. It's like at some point it's just gonna creep in and it's gonna poison the well of everything.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And maybe especially because of that, the diversity that you refer to, which is makes the beauty of the tattoo world, but and but also makes it quite makes the likelihood of ending up around people that you just don't necessarily vibe with slightly higher as well. And
Mm,
this is I think that applies that applies for clients, for artists as well. For artists that have been more crucial even because you spend obviously your whole a lot of time with all those people. But I think but yeah, I think it's important on every level, and it's not necessarily something that you get immediately, and there's trial and error.
mm,
But what I find interesting, as you said, in 2020 is I think on every level, it's right now there is even an extremely sort of minority, not in the sense like ethnic or whatever, but like sort of even in minorities within tattoo culture,
mm,
like minority profiles, like people who are not typically in the tattoo industry. There's enough of for each different profile. There's enough people that now you don't have to be isolated anymore. There might not
mm,
be a huge community,
mm,
but you will have a few shops that will, whatever, like people who are extremely into this or that type of music, people who, you know, have these or that, religious preferences or whatever. You can probably find, you know, a little community of people, not geographically located, but throughout the world, people who that you will be able to vibe with, and that's something quite amazing because I don't think it really works out. It works like that in any other industry that I know, really.
mm,
I think that in most of the or industry or communities, I think that
mm,
people tend to define themselves much more rigidly, although obviously not as much as it was in the 90s or whatever. But but yeah, anyway, it's very interesting what you're saying, and I think that that experience is, I think that in that sense, tattooing has, I wouldn't say necessarily a duty or mission, because whatever, like, I don't think we have to take it like that, but tattooing has the opportunity to show, to give a certain template of how certain things can coexist and certain
mm,
very you know, yeah, diverse types of people can, in fact, share a certain amount of things without any, um, yeah, without bumping heads, really,
mm,
and sharing the love of a thing, which is tattooing for us.
mm,
But it could be something else, it could be something else as well. But like, I definitely feel that there is a sort of universal quality to tattooing. I don't know, it's hard to say, but like I think that anyone who's tattooing will tell you, yeah, like there's something special, and that experience of tattooing
Mm.
is something we have in common, and we can all agree on the love that we have for that, and we can talk about that. We can, there will be something that we can talk about around that, however different we are, and there's something quite beautiful about that. I think, but yeah, but then obviously a lot of other stuff can come in the way eventually over time.
Well, in all industries, doesn't it? But there's like, you're right. There is something beautiful too in the way that people in tattooing is still pretty free to do, to just work together and then not work together anymore, and then make shops and leave shops, and just it's a good thing because there's still a lot of freedom in the industry to be who you want and work whoever you want with. Like, this sentence didn't make sense. And so yeah, it's and still now, like, still during like those tough times, it's still a pretty exciting time to be tattooing. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a pretty inspiring thing right now.
And so talking about inspiration, how do you currently, so you mentioned going back to comic book or comic sort of drawing. How do you balance, like, what kind of things are you into in general, like artistically, passively or actively, as in comic book drawing, and how do
Mm.
you make sense and make sort of strike a balance, or like, or flow between the different things you do and the things you like?
Um, Actively, I have only drawing.
Okay.
Drawing, and I'd love to, I would say painting if it's digital, but I haven't done any analog or traditional painting in years, which I would love to go back to, but it's like requires time. Otherwise, in general, yeah, comics, painting, dance, film, music. It's just, I do love a lot of things. But what was the like the your precisely your question again? Like,
It's just how do you balance, and sort of how do these things, yeah, just like, what's the word, inform, or like,
mm,
cross pollinate, um, in the sense that, and so I would just also precise a question, like, yeah, you mentioned drawing, but for example, your drawings, do you publish them? Do you actually, are you active like professionally in
mm,
publishing or working as an illustrator? But so the question, I think it's interesting as well, because the more things evolve as well, and the more you'll find people who don't necessarily are only tattooists, and like, I feel that up until, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was such a life choice that tattooing just defined everything from the music you
mm,
listen to everything. And today you can, be all kinds of different people with different types of music choices,
mm,
tastes, whatever, and be a tattooist. But tattooing can not necessarily be, you define your entire life in that way. um so, and so for even, myself, like, it took me a long time. The reason why I personally got to tattooing later, maybe, is that I couldn't really find how tattooing fitted in the bigger
mm,
picture of all the things I had an interest for, because I was in Europe, where, tattooing is almost never, or was never, at that point in the mid 2000s, early 2000s.
mm,
At that point, tattooing was never associated to hip hop, for example. But my background is graffiti, and kind of more like, you know, urban, just like this term, but like, that kind of American urban. I was never into rock culture, like, or not actively. Like, I mean, it was not a culture I was identifying with, even if I could listen to some music. But um, and so for me, it didn't really make sense, like, at that stage, because tattooing in Europe came with that sort of, rock and roll, metal kind of identity immediately, or punk rock or whatever. And and I knew that there was something different, that it was slightly different in America or whatever. But like, and anyway, I got to a point in my life where I felt comfortable with appropriating it. But even at that stage, where I felt I didn't personally have to define myself through it, or I didn't have to change something or compromise. But it took me to reach my late 20s to get to the point where I was like confident enough to make that step. Whereas today, I feel that anyone can come and like listen to any kind of music, and you can, and so anyway, why am I saying all of this? Because of that sort of diversity, but also the fact that I think it's important. Well, I feel that nonetheless, once you start tattooing, you're, every day, and it's a very demanding job if you want to do it well, if you want to make it your livelihood. And anyway, I think generally people aspire to be in a coherent world, and I think that as artists, often things kind of inspire each other, like the music, the mood you might be into, whatever, somehow influences your I mean, either you completely compartmentalize things, or but that's not ideal. And otherwise, I don't know, like I can think of a lot of tattooists who will also kind of have the music they listen to, or even the art related to the certain types of music that they like, eventually trickle down to their tattooing style or whatever. So I guess my question is, do you see the cross-pollination in between the things you like and the things you do?
Yes, I would say. Yeah. The thing is, I didn't really have, since I got into tattooing, it was quite early, but not too early. I was like 23, 24. I didn't have like such a big, like, for example, you're talking about your background, and I was not part, like, for example, I was not part of any scene or anything. Like,
Right.
I had friends, but it's not like a community that got me into tattooing. It's
Right.
more my personal choices. And I remember approaching the person who was my mentor at that time, thinking that, yeah, it's tattooing is also, I was already tattooed, like I said, but like tattooing was also something that I felt could be like an interesting media to work with, on top of all the more traditional medias that I knew, because at that time I was still painting, at that time I was drawing a lot more traditionally. And I remember, though, now I remember it, in 2009, 2010, I still had like my drawing style was a lot more, you could feel like I was a lot more influenced by animation, comics.
Okay.
Like now I feel like now what I do has evolved into something like a lot more smooth, a lot more, I don't know, it's just like, it's not as like animation inspired that how it used to be. And I remember getting comments at that time of, this is not very tattoo-like. This is not very this. This is not very that. It was just like, it was not neo-trad enough. It was not new school enough. It was not trad enough. It was just weird. It was, well, it was not that weird. It was just illustrative, but the kind of illustrative probably people didn't see that much at that time, especially in a small town, I guess. And now I definitely feel at home when I see like all the younger generation, and like, I feel like, yeah, like I'm surrounded by people who are obviously into the same thing as me. Like before, I felt, I knew people who had like the same interests, but it's like it didn't translate into their style. When I feel like I've always, I've never changed anything for tattooing. I've changed a few things, like how, in order to make like a design tattooable, but I've never really tweaked any of my drawings. I've never made it look like something, not that it's a critique or something, but it's just that I could never draw otherwise than how I draw.
Yeah.
If it makes sense.
Of course.
So yeah, yeah. I guess now it really translates really well, but it felt really alien, if it makes sense, in the
Yeah.
beginning, because yeah, people were just like criticizing all the time, and you were like,
Yeah.
okay, am I doing this right?
Well, but that, I mean, I think there's nothing better than, you know, believing in your own vision, having one first of all, then believing in it and applying it with intelligence, perseverance, and, you know, and it works out and your
Yeah.
vision paid off because, you know, it did work within tattooing. And I think, you know, yeah, I think there is room again, like as we've been saying, but like there is room today for anyone's little niche and whatever, and like, and then right now, yeah, like do your thing, and then, you know, worst cases, people won't buy into it, you know,
Mm.
that's the worst that can happen, like you won't find any work. But I think that, you know, there's artists kind of are, I don't think, you know, artists are sponges. They're more like, for me, we're more like little molecules that vibrate with the environment, and then, you know, like all of a sudden you sink in with your environment, and
Mm.
then the vibration, you know, becomes, you know, reinforces itself, and you can vibrate like, you know, with more and more energy, and your environment sort of starts sinking in, you know, the sort of resonance effect. But that's yeah, but that's it's nice to hear. And, you know, obviously, I love your work, so I think it's
Thank
you
you.
know, it's like
But that's um, I'm gonna bounce back on something you said
mhm,
about vision.
mhm,
It's interesting because um, I don't know about all people, and I don't know if people really how people perceive a tattoo artist when they start into the scene, but I didn't have a vision when I started tattooing. I just needed a plan to survive.
yeah,
That was what it was. And I got into tattooing because it made sense, a lot
mhm,
of sense at that time, but it just it felt like instinct, you know?
mhm,
I'm gonna try to make sense of this, but I didn't have a plan, and it's okay not to have a plan. It's like sometimes you discover what your plan is as you go. It's what do I want out of this? I was drawn to this. Why? Like, is it sustainable? Am I going to make a living out of this? Is it really cut for me? Because lots of people go into tattooing thinking that they're gonna make it and it's gonna be great, but sometimes you have to realize that you're not cut for it because it's a really tough, it's a very tough word. Even whether you're in the industry or outside of the industry, which means like whether you do conventions or not, it's still extremely demanding. So you have to realize if you're cut for it. So I found it interesting because I think it's really inspiring when I hear people talking about the fact that they have a vision with this. When sometimes you're just like, I can here with my pencil and I'm just gonna draw and I'm gonna tattoo and yep. So that's why there's always that imposter syndrome coming back every time you talk about this, because it's like it feels like people are gonna think that you came here with all those big ideas and your art and oh my god, it's amazing, and you're like, "Mm, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Am I doing
mhm,
this right? I don't know.
of
So
course.
yeah. Mm.
But I think there's something equally humbling as well. I think that with tattooing, you know, I of course everyone, I think, at a point or another, like has to deal with the imposter syndrome kind of thing. But at least there's also, I feel that, you know, of course there can be a bit of a code thing or whatever. There can be, sure, to a certain extent, but I think that the tattoo industry, or being a tattoo artist, is something that keeps you grounded. I mean, you can only tattoo that many people. It's always a one-on-one thing. It's
Mm.
always something that will be you, just you, and not an assistant, not a recording, not and it's not something you can multiply. It's something that etc etc. So and there's less of that, you know, and so I feel that when you like there's something so real and genuine when you have that person in front of you and it's a real person. I mean, yeah, of course, occasionally, like someone, you know, clearly comes with a very wrong impression or very sort of idealized idea of what they're gonna get out of that interaction. Sure, of course, but I would say most of the time you have two people who have an encounter, who are there with, you know, in the simplest human condition, as humans, and who are going to do the best they can to find this sort of common ground. And and yeah, like all you can do is be honest and be like, look, I'm going to be able to do this, I'm not going to be able to do that, you know. And personally, I've never felt the imposter syndrome while interacting with the person, like, because I will never be anything else than exactly what I am, and that person, and I'm just there, and I will never like lie to a person or whatever. And I think there is sort of honesty, which which really is the rule much more than the exception in the tattoo industry, which is in part because of, you know, sincerity, etc., and ethics, in part also because that's a certain way to, you know, to be realistic about expectations, to, you know, manage expectations of a client, because there's only, you know, because no, yeah, like you'll do your best like every time. And but sometimes, you know, things don't work out exactly the way you want or
Yeah.
whatever. Like everyone can have a day, you know, a down day or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I feel what you're saying, but I think it must be, it's, I like that sort of back and forth, that sort of constant reality check that you
Oh
get
yeah.
as a tattoo artist in that sense.
That's also tattooing that on exactly on what you're saying, because I think so many of us suffer from this imposter syndrome, but it is really tattooing that not got me out of it, because I still live with it like it's my housemate. And it's just that I realized that I've suffered from imposter syndrome since forever, like forever. I still struggle with it, but at some point when I was interacting with some people, I would experience, like you're saying that you would not experience it when you're talking one-on-one on someone you're going to tattoo. I would experience it like as I'm tattooing. But there's only so much negativity you can feed into your brain when you're tattooing someone for life. And it was a matter of me, after years of just being like, I can't sustain that kind of negative pattern if I'm going to interact with people like this. It's like,
Yeah.
they're coming to me because like that, if you're self-critical on your work, it's great because this is going to get you higher and higher and higher. But at some point you have to know when to step back, to step out of your brain and just look at your work and say I did good today.
Yeah.
And be like, okay, I did good today. I can do better tomorrow, but right now I did good.
Yes.
Because I've heard countless people, and it's heartbreaking, countless amazing artists were just like, I don't understand why people come to me. And I'm like, at some point you have to really just, you know, shake yourself and have a good look at what you're doing. Because sometimes I'm like, where's the line between hypocrisy and real, you know, art dysmorphia?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
If you're having art dysmorphia, just stop tattooing, because it's going to drive you completely insane.
Yeah.
It's just that, and I know it's difficult. It took me years to do it, and I struggle every day. Like, I'm doing commissions right now for my clients who I can't tattoo, and I'm gonna finish one, and I'm gonna be happy, and I'm gonna be like, oh, this looks nice. I'm gonna send it, and I'm like, this was horrible. Why did I do this? Why? And then I come back to it, and I'm like, no, this is good. This is okay. I did well. It's like, you have to be your own supporter, because you know you're never going to believe anyone else. It's like, even if you have countless people coming to you and being like, your art is amazing, I love you, and blah, 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 you know within yourself, it's never going to feed you enough, ever.
Yeah.
It's only you who can just like really be your best critique and be like, I know I tell you your shit all the time, but right now you're doing good. You're doing good and you can do better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's not the only reason, but I think that there's something that personally has been a huge, you know, I've been aware of that since I was a child, essentially. But I think there is a social conditioning, or so a way people who build up or start developing a sort of artistic sensitivity and start, you know, nurturing that, or sort of, and there is like a pattern, there is like a social conditioning around that. You know, when you grow up with that idea and hearing, if not directly from your parents or whatever, but you will, and maybe even less now, I don't know, but like then back when I was a kid, and probably even more before, but like you will, you know, that thing like, oh, art is not a real profession, art is not something that you know, the whole imposter thing, it comes from that conditioning where, you know, society tells you this is not a thing. It's not like it's not, and especially I find that especially when it comes to, yeah, like being professional. Like art is not something you should be paid for. It's something fun. I mean, there's not only around art, but anything. So art, of course, and then on top of that, there is, you know, generally the idea that anything fun, like if you are earning money with something you actually like, is already something that is, you know, that you'll be guilt tripped about. And so there's these two things that sort of collapse in the fact, you know, in the whole tattooing thing, or the art thing in particular, and like the idea that you can express yourself and make a living off it. You know, the motivations behind it, I have my own ideas, and they would take a while to get into right now, but they're an interesting question nonetheless. But I think this is definitely something, and I agree. I think coming to peace, even if it's a cycle, but at least temporary, momentarily, coming to peace with that is crucial, especially in tattooing, because it is nurtured in some other fields, such as, you know, fine arts, where, you know, you go from like the sort of extreme kind of, you know, artists, like celebrity artist, genius, whatever, to the sort of, you know, artiste maudit, like, you know, crazy person, and sort of on that sort of crazy hermit, or slightly autistic kind of side of that spectrum of that sort of categories of artists. This is even more like, to me, I've seen a lot of people, kind of get pushed in a very destructive sort of position in arts, in fine arts, I mean contemporary arts or whatever, because of the fact that they sort of never could get themselves out of that narrative, and that idea of like, or the effects of the institutionalization of that idea of like imposter and like this kind of thing. Whereas in the tattoo world, what I find interesting is like, for this, and for the lack of a better term, although, you know, but I think there's something about the energy that you put out, and I always felt that I owe the person in front of me, and I believe that's kind of what you were saying as well. there is a person who doesn't fucking care how I feel. Like, they think they are going to get something that will make them happy. They have to believe it 100%, and I owe that person to be sure, because you know, you don't want to get tattooed and then the next day you hear the artist being like, oh yeah, I suck so bad. You're like, I don't know, like, I'm not an artist, like,
Yeah,
I have
that's
a tattoo by that person, like, what should I think about that, you know? We that person needs to leave thinking they have the best thing you've ever done, and the only way they will believe that is if you believe it.
yeah,
And maybe the world gives them a reality check and tells them, no, it sucks, mate. But still,
I
I
agree.
think I always felt it was a kind of almost ethical thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, where I felt I have, and you said, you talked about being hypocritical, about hypocrisy. Yeah, 100%. Like, I was like, it has to be, not only I have to feel like that, but it has to be sincere, because people feel if you're not being sincere, and
Yeah,
you know, there's something off somewhere, and it's
yeah,
bad energy, and it's something
yeah,
that exists in that tattoo. So, but it is a very important point, and I think, and it's interesting you bring it up. I think that it is something that a lot of people have to balance and have to, and I think it's interesting. How did you feel that certain things helped you, or like what kind of, I think you refer to a certain point where you try to balance this, or like keep that in check. What was the how did you do
um
that?
I think I don't think there was a breaking point, but it was a bit constant. But I would say when I moved to London,
Hmm.
I had to build myself up from ground zero. It was really a new beginning, and I had to aggressively sell myself, like I never did before, because I just before I left France, I had like a fairly comfortable situation. I was okay. So when I got to London, I knew that now I had to. I can hear myself. Is there a problem with that?
I hear
Because
you fine, but I think the connection might be a little patchy. I hear you fine on my end.
sorry, it's quite loud. Um, so yeah, like when I got to London, I was in a city that was very aggressive professionally. It was, you had to fight, like nobody was going to pick you up. So that's when I would say that I really had to aggressively sell, like think better about myself, go to people and be like, I can do this for you. I can, I've never done that before. It's fine. I can do it now. It's like I've never had to tackle walk-ins, like real walk-ins in France, because France is not like doesn't have a walk-in culture really in shops. Maybe in like old shops, but otherwise it's like only appointments. So it's, I would say like it shaped a lot of my confidence um, when I got here, but it was really because I was forced into it.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, now I don't have a choice. It's like I have to believe I can do this. Otherwise, yeah, I'm just gonna sink.
Right.
And yeah, but also therapy, working on yourself constantly, messing things up and talking to people, just confronting people, just like the usual. It's just, it's also, this works if you're willing to do the work,
Yes.
whether it's like tattooing or just evolve as a person. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Very good point. Um, okay. Did you have themes or things that you wanted to share or talk about in particular? That I saw there's a few questions, not super relevant from what I could see, but before we have a look, did you have things on your mind or whatever that you wanted to?
Not really. It's there's literally so many things I could talk about, like so many different topics. So just picking one out of my brain is really difficult. I think I'd need someone to just kickstart something, and then I could go on forever. But right now I'm a bit like,
Yeah.
I could do headlines.
Okay. Let's have a look at the questions real quick, because also I think that around an hour is a pretty good duration for the for those chats. Yeah, people asking about your tattooing style, some little compliments, but I'll let you. I'll take a screenshot for you. Well, yeah, maybe maybe just a little for people who might not know. I mean, of course, they should just go check out your work. But I think for me, when I saw your work, I definitely kind of immediately like placed it within a sort of stylistic, frame of reference that I have, because I grew up on comic books. I grew up on European comics, which for Americans who might not necessarily, be aware, but like there truly is, comics in Europe are something completely different from American comics, and personally, I cannot get into American comics whatsoever. Like it's
Not even
like,
indie comics?
sorry.
Not even indie comics?
A little bit, a tiny bit here and there. There's some things where, no, I mean, okay, so no, so when I said that, I was picturing, Marvel and
Oh yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of these kind of like super like traditional.
Yeah.
There definitely are more recent things. I mean, they were like, influences, of course. I remember, and there's a tradition of illustration in America, like the kind of fantasy illustration. So Robert Bisley, or Frank Frazetta, like that kind of lineage. Um, that I was at some point in my life a long time ago, but I got really influenced, and I really got into that kind of use of color and that sort of, and even like even before that, I was liked advertising. I was, as a kid, I remember getting a book from Alphonse Murat, the sort of the Art Nouveau guy, and then getting into the American pinup art, like what's his name, Gil Elfgren, and that kind of school of people. And then I think that stylistically, this is the same lineage as Frank Frazetta and that kind of thing later, or at least that's how I view it. I might be wrong, but anyway, so there definitely is a little bit of that, but I never got into the kind of stories, or really, I mean, there were definitely graphically very catchy stuff that I enjoyed. Also, I have to say, like, I was really into comics up until my late teens. After that, I kind of dropped out. So there's a certain amount of things related to just accessing things. But anyway, there definitely is that. Say that again.
I could bring a couple. I could bring a couple of books to the shop one day for you.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I'm reading.
Yeah.
I bought all the comics that I used to read. I bought them for my kids now. I try to get them into, obviously, Tintin, all the classics, Yoko Tsuno, whatever. But also, I really liked, that is my, my generation. But even, even Akira, that like the original comics of Akira and stuff like that, obviously legendary. So that's kind of, if anything, like I got into Japanese comics more than American. So anyway, there definitely is that sort of European school, and and yeah, and so when I saw your work, for me it made sense immediately. but I think the question, I'll pop it up actually. You can you see?
How did I develop my own style in tattooing?
Yeah, so
That's
maybe I guess if you could give maybe some points, maybe some names or like, you know, reference points, that'd be really interesting.
some names. You mean like influences?
Yeah,
For
of
example? Yeah.
things that, yeah.
Um, I would say my first real influence in drawing was Marcel Gottlieb.
Yeah,
I have
amazing.
like an endearing story with his grandson, and it was like the most magical thing that ever happened to me. But I have Marcel Gottlieb, and I would have Wendy Pini.
Hmm.
That she's American, for instance, and it's like fantasy elf comics from the 70s, 80s. If you
Hmm.
like Frazetta, you have to read Elf Quest. You're gonna
Okay.
love this. Is the best. And so these were like really cornerstones of what helped me develop my style growing up. And then I would say um, it's just after drawing and drawing and drawing and tattooing and tattooing and tattooing, your style tweaks and it takes directions on its own. Really, it's like, or sometimes you're gonna encounter something and you're going to be like, oh, I like that, like in a painting or in an illustration, and you're like, how could I integrate this into my style or into how I work, because I kind of like this kind of rendition. And that's trial and error. That's just
Right.
really how everybody does it, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Do you like I mean, yeah, there's a generational thing for sure, because my references are definitely like 80s, if
But
not
I have
70s. But like, do you like, do you ever get into that kind of school of like, yes, between 70s and to 90s Italian comics?
like, give me names.
There's some really, there's, I don't remember the name of the illustrator, but there's that amazing
Copy?
series called Rank Xerox.
Oh my god. Liberator?
Yeah, how amazing is that? I bought them
We
all.
don't make them like this anymore, I'm
No,
afraid.
but I always
Yeah,
like, I
that's
always,
incredible.
yeah,
I
yeah,
start. I've read my first rank Xerox. I was way too young for this.
yes, I
I
think
was way
same.
too young.
I was definitely introduced to things that I shouldn't have been introduced to at a
Yeah.
young age. But even like, even for me, uh,
So you're
uh,
like, you seem to be very much into like comics that have like a very heavy, very color, like very not realistic, but like more on the realistic, like painterly kind of style. Like, because when you
no, but
say
that was part. That was part. That was one side. I always like. I can be quite a bit schizophrenic on some taste stuff. Yes, like there was always something I was quite drawn to, but then there was the whole what's his name, Guido Crepax. Do you
oh
know?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
well
like
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
example, Manara, or like, you know, the like the very
Mm,
black, or even like, you
mm,
know, Aubrey Birdsley and people like that. Like, I guess
mm,
I guess I guess I always had that as well. And personally, I'm not good at producing color stuff.
mm,
So I think I always had these two kind of, I was drawn to these very graphic
yeah.
stuff or very catchy, colorful stuff. And then as in my own designs, in my own drawings, I went towards the more graphic stuff. Um, but then the whole range, like Ligne Claire stuff, there was
Mm.
is obviously, you know, a huge part of. Do you know a Dutch comic books, well, comic illustrator, Joost? I don't know how it's pronounced. Joost Swart, Joostswarte.
Right now, it doesn't ring a bell, but if you show me his artwork, probably. I'm bouncing back on the American
Hmm.
ones. You've never read Love and Rockets.
No,
You've
no, it
never
doesn't
read
ring a
this.
bell.
You
No,
like Ligne Claire, and you've never read this. I'm bringing
no.
it to look up, and you're gonna read it. You're gonna read
Yes,
this. This is
please. Because as I said, I also dropped out at an age when there was no internet. I didn't have any money because, you know, I was a kid essentially, or a young teen. It's not like I could even, like, I remember buying those re-editions, like French editions of the Akira comics, and those were like 20 euros a one book. Like I remember getting like two of those and be like, wow, you know, blowing up my my budget for like months, and they were like
Yeah.
20 in the whole collection. A lot of those were very expensive, and so anyway, so I have like, there's a few things that I remember very clearly because I didn't have that many. I studied them so hard. Like I remember trying to, you know, really redraw like the things, the characters, trying to understand how it was done. But like, but yeah, my culture is fairly limited. So I'd love any
I
suggestions.
see there's a person who just posted in the comments, like Joan Svar, and since there's like 3 comments, I'm gonna reply because it's obsessing.
Yeah,
It's
go on.
obsessive. And I've read Joan Svar, but I don't like him. His work is iconic on some topics, but I don't like the guy. This we can go into another conversation in the DMs. But yeah, no, his comics are amazing, but not all of them. But yeah, he's like very famous in France, and I know him. Obviously, who wouldn't? But yeah, just don't like the guy.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna recommend him.
Any other thing you wanted to reply to?
Is there any other questions? I think like I have a friend who said Cat Noir Inc. She said she sent a question. I don't know. I can't see them.
Let me see. Oh yeah.
What are
Yeah,
some of your
I think
favorite
that's
comics? Yeah, interested in these European comics. My favorite comics. So in American comics, I would say my favorite would be Love and Rockets by Jaime Hernandez, or I don't know if he pronounces his name the American, the English way, I don't know. But Love and Rockets, Mignola and his Hellboy, obviously. ElfQuest by Wendy Pini and Richard Pini, which just changed my life when I was 12. Peter Bagg and his hate comics, love them. And there's like obviously a lot of other comics I could think of that are in my shelf, but right now I just can't think of them. And in Europe, I would say Gottlieb, as Marcel Gottlieb's work, has a very, very special place in my heart. Like a friend of mine told me that I still like the way I draw hands look a lot like the way he draws hands, because his drawings were the first that really impacted me so much when I was a kid. Like the way he did his hands, that this is something that just stayed in my brain. And even if you look at his drawings, you can still see like really how much he influenced me. And then European comics, there's just so many. It's so difficult to just like pick a few. I would say Akira. It's not European, but Akira, Otomo's Akira, is probably one of my most revered Bible of all times. Alita Gun by Yukizo Kishiro, which is like a monument of cyberpunk, of 90s cyberpunk. And so many others. There's just so many. I can make a list.
Okay, I think it'd be interesting if you made a list. I'll be happy to post it. But
yeah,
I just wanted to also, at least for me, the question was not for me, but I remembered one that also was very particularly influential for me, which was Enki Bilal.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the La Foire aux Immortels et La Femme Piège and being like, this is like a whole world opened up in my mind. And I'm not sure if that trickled down to the way I work in any way, but definitely in the themes. I mean, it was so unbelievable in terms of stories, but then there was something, that sort of mix of like extremely beautiful characters, beautiful colors, and they're quite graphic, but also like there's kind of like very trashy, like, you know, kind of.
Yeah, his work is very it was very different for the times. It was
Yeah.
very experimental. It's like it's painting, it's comics, it's illustration, you don't really know. And he was someone like young artist like me who didn't want to fit in like the old, you know, how like Belgian and French comment looked like. You kind of looked up to guys like Enki Bilal because he was just so weird. His
Yeah.
style was so weird and it was just so different. And I think at that time, like in the 90s, 2000s, people were just like hungry for new things, like we saw in music, like you saw in so many things, and in comics it was the same. And Bilal was just like very much like him. My friend, so Kat, she just you just asked, like, you know, the band from the 80s. I think the title of the comics is actually comes from the band, if I'm not saying anything stupid. But it would be something like this because the author was very involved in the punk hardcore scene of Southern California in the 80s. So it wouldn't be, maybe something I'm saying something wrong, but I think it's related.
Interesting.
Oh, and Larsenet, yes. Yeah. Bart posted about Larsenet, and yeah, this guy, like, the more like his late work, you should check it out, Maxime. Larsenet,
Okay.
because he's
Well, I'll get a reading list from you.
yeah. I will definitely send you a list because it's incredible. Like it got like so dark. Whether it's story wise or just style wise, it's just mind blowing. His ink work is incredible. So yeah, definitely.
Amazing. So, my dear, personally, I am, yeah, very tired now, and but I think we've covered a lot of ground, and it's nice because I feel like we should definitely hang out socially a little more, and because it also happens to be something that I know probably no one like in my immediate circle that I can sort of share these kinds of things with, and that things that actually really influenced me in so many ways, like really pushed me to be like to pursue art in a way or another, because you know, painting or like more sort of, yeah, like fine or like high arts, like noble arts, were not really, you know, around me. So anyway, it was very interesting. So thank you for taking that time.
No, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. It was nice to talk about those things.
Totally. And yeah, let's hope to hang out in real life and at the studio soon
Yeah,
when things can resume.
yeah.
Apparently, our favorite prime minister, no, I'm joking. But yes, the prime minister will be announcing something about deconfinement maybe on Sunday. So
Really?
fingers crossed. Yeah, yeah, there'll be an announcement. So yeah, indeed. But yeah, very good to see you. And
Thanks.
yeah, have a good night. Speak soon.
You too. Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you to everyone. We'll be posting the video soon. All right. Bye bye.
Bye.